My wife cheated on me and I refused to sign the birth certificate for the child from her affair. I've been married for 7 years to my 33-year-old wife, and we don't have children. 2 years ago she began a new job and did well initially. She mentioned a CO worker she disliked and called him an a-hole. However, her attitude towards him softened over time, and she stopped talking about him much. Despite our imperfect marriage, I've always trusted her, and we generally got along well. Jump ahead about a month ago, I started noticing changes. She began texting more frequently, keeping her phone close at all times. Her evenings and weekends suddenly became busier. She grew distant and avoided any affection. Plus, she started lying about odd things. The last lie happened when she packed for a business trip and brought a much more revealing swimsuit than she'd ever worn before. When I asked her about it, she said she'd ordered it online. I didn't believe her and thought it wasn't suitable for a work trip to Florida, but she took it along on the trip while she was away. I'd never snooped through my wife's belongings before, but I was fed up with the constant deceit in her work bag. I discovered a caricature of her. There was also a drawing of her on hotel paper with a post-it note next to it. I found a note with directions to her male Keo worker's house written in her handwriting. When I reviewed our bank statements, I saw that she'd claimed to be at work, but was actually dining at various city restaurants. This made me think she might be lying about where she was, so I decided to do some digging. As a professional private investigator, I don't mind intruding on privacy when I have good reason to. In this case, I legally placed a GPS tracker on her car. I also tracked her car, which is titled under my name in our state. When she got back from the trip, she said she'd been to a coffee shop and done some errands on a Sunday. But her car didn't go near a Chipotle. She came back with a Chipotle cup, so I knew she'd eaten there. Then on Tuesday she said she was going to a company dinner and working late. The GPS data showed her leaving work at 3:20 p.m., and she was at the restaurant until 9 p.m. The next Saturday we were supposed to watch my niece play tennis at 8 a.m. She said she wanted to drive alone so she could leave the tennis place and go to a coffee shop after the game. She said she was going to X coffee shop and talked a bit about why she wanted to go there. I said have a good day and went to my car using the GPS. I saw she drove straight to I got to the Comfort Inn and waited in a nearby parking lot until I could be sure she was inside, not in her car. I called her from the lobby and asked how X coffee shop was. She said it was good and asked why I wanted to know. I just said come down here so we can talk. She came down and said it's not what you think. He has to do this because he's been caught with other girls before. I asked what she meant and she said he always works in hotel rooms. She said they didn't do anything physical, and that's when I told her to get out of my car. I left, and she called me. After 50 attempts, I finally responded, stating that if she told another lie, I would end the call. She admitted to kissing him once, approximately 5 months ago, but claimed it was a mistake and meant nothing. She insisted that they were simply working. I inquired about the number of times she had met him in hotels, and she stated that it was approximately 10 times over the past 9 months. Then I asked what she did on that Tuesday, and she got defensive. She said she was at work all day until a work dinner. I told her I thought she was lying and hung up. She came to our house while I was loading my stuff and my dog into my car. She stayed in the driveway, refusing to move. Until we spoke, she was crying and saying sorry. I was really upset that day. I left, and it's been a month since then. We've met a few times for her to explain things, but when I ask my questions, she gets upset and defensive. She says answering isn't good for us. She's lied about small things. When I call, she says I'm trapping her. She's made it clear that it wasn't a romantic thing. She claims they were just good friends and he was helping with her job. Their talks got inappropriate, discussing our problems. She's admitted to texting him and deleting the texts, saying they weren't romantic, but they could be seen as flirting. She said he helped with her depression and work issues. I want to trust her, maybe because I love her, or I'm scared of the truth. I'm stuck trying to find the truth, but even if I find it, I don't see how I can get past what I already know. Am I losing it? Update, we're a month post. I spoke with her last night, and here's what I found out. I asked about her chats with the man over the past 4 weeks. She said he has no idea about my confrontation at the D-Day Hotel. She hasn't discussed it with him, as she sees it as a marital issue that doesn't involve him. I asked about cutting off She said she's limiting her contact with him. I got upset because I think she should cut off all contact, not just scale back. She told me a small lie, and I confronted her. She denied it, but I'm sure she was lying. I let it go. After she said she was cutting back on socializing with the other man, I decided to keep an eye on things. I hid a voice recorder in my house and left last night. When I checked the tape, I found that my wife and this man had been chatting for well over an hour in at least 2 calls. The recording stopped in the afternoon, so I assumed they spoke more in the evening. I didn't catch many specifics, but I heard a few incriminating remarks. They discussed our marriage's status, which she claimed he knew nothing about. They also chatted about using a secret phone app to avoid detection. She insulted me for arriving late. I figured they'd spoken more in the evening, but I didn't catch many specifics. I did hear a few remarks that seemed incriminating. They discussed the status of our marriage, which she'd claimed he was unaware of. They also chatted about using a secret phone app to avoid detection. She insulted me for arriving late. Over breakfast, they chatted and laughed about lots of different things. I haven't heard my wife laugh like that since we were dating. I confronted her and she admitted to some things, but denied others. I'm not bothered either way. I'm meeting a divorce lawyer this morning. I haven't spoken to my spouse for a while. I texted her to ask for a chat. I said I'd only come to the table if she was completely open. She said she knew about a wiretap on her phone, but there wasn't one. I let her think that I already knew everything. I wanted to hear it from her directly. In the end, she agreed to meet up and tell me everything. When she came over, she admitted that she'd been seeing someone else for 6 months. She also said she'd booked a hotel room the day before our anniversary to meet him. She kept in touch with him after she found out, saying he'd helped her deal with my questions. She said the affair was over and that she wanted to fix our marriage. She only told me this 6 weeks after I caught her in the hotel. I think she only told me because despite my persistence, she maintains that she always intended to come clean and minimize the hurt for both of us. However, the damage appears insurmountable. We ended up divorcing, but I took my time before making that decision. In hindsight, I wish I hadn't waited as long. My wife wanted to stay together, but I didn't understand why. She kept lying to me and making me doubt myself, so it was impossible to reconcile. Going through the divorce has been the hardest thing I've ever done. I was fully committed, but I'm not perfect. I loved my wife and wanted to make her happy. I was willing to do anything to make her happy. I believe I made significant efforts on multiple occasions. Now that I've distanced myself from that relationship, I can see it for what it truly was. A narcissistic person draining the energy and goodness out of someone who cared. The marriage felt completely one-sided. I was giving everything to the relationship, but it seemed like she was taking even more than she could give. By the end, I started to believe I was a worthless partner. She undermined my profession, my personality, and my appearance. However, since the divorce, my business has thrived, and I've been able to date women I once thought were out of my league. I used to think I was unattractive, partly due to my ex. I've had some great experiences with younger women since my wife's influence has diminished. I've had a few wonderful relationships with amazing women, which ended amicably due to compatibility issues. These relationships helped me see how terrible of a partner my ex-wife really was. My wife was truly awful. I don't have any contact with my ex anymore, and I rarely think about her. The divorce became contentious because she thought I was receiving too much of the money. I accepted less than to ensure a smoother process without disrupting businesses and retirements. It's astounding that she could cheat on someone and then complain about the amount of money there even if it's less than half. It just reinforced my belief that I made the right decision and needed to distance myself from this toxic situation as quickly as possible. I lost some friends during the divorce, but I'm not bothered by it. Most of them took my side, and I have no concern for those who didn't. It was easy for me to let them go. The hardest part was losing my in-laws. I genuinely cared about some of them, but I understand their stance. I sent enough correspondence to my ex-wife's affair partner's wife to make it clear what had happened. While she never responded, I respect her decision. If you're going through this nightmare, here's some advice. Take advice, but make your own decisions, because it's your life. There were dark days after discovering the affair, but after the initial shock, this period has been the best time of my life. I find happiness every day. If you're facing a similar situation, I'd love to hear your thoughts and advice if you've been through something similar. Please feel free to reach out. I'm here to help. That was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive into story 2. Around a month ago, I discovered that both of my children were the result of affairs with my soon-to-be ex-wife. My wife and I had been wondering for a while whether my son wasn't biologically mine. I was really happy when he was born 6 years ago. My wife and I had got married and had a child together, and everything seemed perfect. However, as he grew older, I started to have doubts about his parentage. He didn't look like me, and the more he grew, the more apparent it became that he looked vastly different from what I would expect my child to look like. I didn't want to let mere appearances drive my suspicions, as I'm not a petty or paranoid person. My wife's behavior raised alarm bells for me. Whenever she went out, her whereabouts didn't match her claims. She had unexplained gaps in her schedule. She refused to let me interact with anyone from her workplace. A close friend of hers accused her of flirting with their significant other. The lies she told started catching up with her, especially after our son's birth. Despite her deceitful nature, I still loved her. It may sound foolish, but whenever one of her lies was exposed, she would assure me of her love for me. I wanted to believe that despite her dishonesty and manipulation, she wasn't unfaithful. Last year she became pregnant again, and I clung to a glimmer of hope that the child might be mine. However, when our daughter was born, it was evident that she was multi-ethnic. I declined to sign the birth certificate and the subsequent paternity test, which confirmed my suspicions. All along, neither of them shared my biological connection. The day I received those test results was the day I initiated divorce proceedings against my unfaithful spouse. I knew that leaving my family would be hard on my son, but I was still surprised at how much it affected him. I had always tried to be a good dad to him, and I was proud of how much I had done for him. But now, when I see him, I feel nothing but disgust. I feel disgusted by my wife, by my own lack of trust in my instincts, and by the fact that the last 6 years of my life have amounted to nothing. People have even called me a monster for leaving my son like this. My ex has tried to manipulate me into reconciling by using my son as a bargaining chip. She has him call me at odd hours of the night, crying and pleading for his dad to return. This was on the day I packed my belongings to move out. She even paraded him into the room to demonstrate the damage I was causing, both online and offline. Every time he is mentioned, I am criticized and condemned. This is despite the fact that I am not biologically related to the boy. I am his father. I have now come to realize that for most people, my own feelings hold no. Significantly, my parents are my only supporters throughout this ordeal. While my own siblings brand me a reprehensible person for leaving a child in such a manner, my sense of betrayal and sorrow is disregarded because a child is involved. I understand it's not his fault. I know that the man he called his father for his entire life just walked away. But why am I expected to man up? Why should I pretend everything is fine and suppress my contempt for this entire situation? Why should I set aside my own life and emotions? I never truly was the boy's father. I loved him as a father, but I would resent and despise him if I were forced to continue playing that role. I would loathe myself for not standing up and reclaiming my own life. He is not my child, and although it's not his fault, he is no longer my responsibility. I suppose sharing my personal issues achieved something, though. I've noticed a few common questions, so I'll address them here. When my son found out why I left, I had a conversation with him. I told him that I am not his biological father, and that his mother lied to me and was unfaithful. I made it clear that I don't have any bad feelings towards WS. He doesn't have any responsibility for this situation, and I'll still think highly of him. Some people have said that I never really cared for him, or that I was always looking for a way out. It's difficult to convey emotions in a text, especially when you have strong feelings towards your unfaithful spouse. You can form your own opinions. I have legal representation, and I won't be obliged to pay child support. Finally, for those suggesting that I should remain in her life and continue as his father, that's not really feasible. I don't hold any animosity towards him, but I've been deceived, lied to, and exploited by a selfish and deceitful individual who has now she's also involved her kids in this mess. He's an innocent bystander and doesn't deserve the blame, but the harsh reality is still there. I don't hate him. I feel sad for him when I think about his situation, When I look at him, I've been deceived for 6 years, taken advantage of for 6 years, and I've accumulated a lot of doubts and frustrations with a woman who used me. I can't just set aside my resentment to try to be a part of his life, because the life I lived with him was nothing more than a facade crafted by his mother. This is the harsh reality I must grapple with, and I cannot in good conscience subject myself or him to any more of it. I've noticed numerous armchair lawyers in the comments suggesting that this post is fake due to the reasons I mentioned earlier. I'm not going to say where I'm currently based, but I am in the process of legally challenging paternity. This is known as the disestablishment of paternity. I know that 90% of you think Google makes you legal experts, but at least I've made an effort. This will be my final edit before I move on from this little distraction I created for myself. Firstly, I want to express my gratitude to everyone for their kind words. Whether in the comments, DMs, or chat, you've brightened my day, which hasn't happened in a while. I wish I could respond to each of you, but I can't. I want to thank each of you, but I can't thank you enough. Secondly, I've noticed many people criticizing the words I used to describe my soon-to-be ex. I want to clarify that I'm currently in one of the darkest periods of my life. All I feel is intense anger towards the woman who has. I'm devastated. I used the wrong language. I called her inappropriate names. I'll admit it was degrading and offensive, but I won't apologize for it. What I've written here today reflects the harsh reality I'm facing right now. It's an unfiltered outpouring of emotions. I'm not trying to make people hate women or say that women are terrible. That's not what I'm trying to do here, and it's not what this post is about. I understand why people have an issue with the word I used, and I accept that as valid criticism. I came here to find an outlet for the situation I'm in. I needed to vent, grieve, and cope with the complex and intense emotions that have consumed me for the past month. I needed a place where I could speak my mind freely, and I achieved that today. I'd like to thank everyone here for listening. I'd like to share a third story. We were together when we were both 22, right after college. Initially, I was more of a friend to her. I asked her out when we both ended up working in the same city. We dated for 9 months, and I believed she was the one for me. However, she suddenly became distant without any apparent reason. She never wanted anything serious back then. I wanted a serious relationship, but she viewed it as neediness. I felt I should be grateful for the opportunity. She was quite popular in college and very attractive, which made me feel insecure because at the time I was working on building my own confidence and believed I was becoming a desirable partner. We stayed in touch due to mutual friends. From what I observed between the ages of 23 and 27, she dated various men. When she was 27 to 28, I heard that her parents attempted to set up an arranged marriage for her, but none of those prospects worked out. Eventually, she reached out to me, and one thing led to another. We started dating at the beginning. She asked me if I was looking for a serious relationship, and I told her I'd never dated without serious intentions. I also said I wasn't in a hurry to get married. I suggested that if she felt pressured by her parents, or for any other reason to get married quickly, she should explore other options. We dated for 6 months, which were honestly some of the best months of my life. Our relationship was great, and she was really accommodating and sweet. She brought up the topic of marriage, but I told her I wasn't ready. Many of our friends had gone through divorces, which made me cautious. I wanted to be sure before taking such a big step. She said I was lying about my intentions, but I showed her messages where I agreed to a serious relationship, just not one that was rushed. She said that overall, after over a year of dating, she said she was eager to settle down. Despite sending her sweet goodnight texts, things became distant between us. She sometimes didn't even respond and showed little interest in meeting. A month passed, and then she told me I should either marry her or move on. She said she could easily find another guy, and that I was fortunate to have her. It's been a painful experience, reminiscent of past ones. I consider myself a modest person, but I also believe I've become an attractive catch despite my fondness for her. I made it clear that I wouldn't be pressured into marriage, so we decided to end our relationship after another month. She started texting me again, and we rekindled our relationship. It's been 3 months now, and she has returned to being her sweet self. She admitted that she was wrong to say she could easily find someone else, and that I'm the right one for her. She wants to get married as soon as I'm ready, and says her parents are pushing her to get married, but she's willing to give me time. However, I feel overwhelmed by the idea of marriage at the moment and concerned about her ability to switch between being sweet and distant so abruptly. Is she being sweet just to persuade me to marry her, even though I like her? I have a feeling that this may not work well in the long run, and it seems like marriage is becoming more of a force than a natural choice. The day after I posted my initial message, the thoughtful comments from people made me realize that I needed to end the relationship. I probably should have reached this realization without posting last Saturday, as things were quite chaotic. I'm really grateful for all the advice I received. After getting advice, I decided to break up with her. I now realize it was the right choice. I called her in the morning and explained that I couldn't handle the sudden changes in behavior. I also told her that she should find someone who is on the same timeline as her and that I didn't want to be pressured into marriage. I expressed that it hurt me when she believed she was better than me and out of my league. I want someone who treats me as an equal. I said I wanted to end things on good terms and wished her well. She got angry and said I'd never loved her. She also said some things about me that I don't want to share, even anonymously. The conversation got heated. I tried to calm her down and end things amicably, but she said I'd wasted her time and wasn't a real man. It ended on a sour note. She sent me a text saying she wanted to end things on better terms. She suggested we have a productive conversation about our relationship in person. When I saw her, she looked more attractive than ever. We decided to have an open exchange of criticism. I acknowledged her criticism about prioritizing work too much. I also shared with her how her comment about being able to find someone, she says that I should be more careful and that such thoughts shouldn't be present in any relationship. She admits her mistake and then gives me lots of compliments, saying that I'm the best guy she's ever dated. She asks if there's anything she can do to fix things, and I say that this relationship is beyond repair, but I'm glad we didn't leave things on a sour note. I make it clear that nothing will change my mind about ending it. I was surprised when she then tried to initiate an intimate encounter, which she had always rejected before, considering it disgusting. I found it even more enjoyable than our previous sexual intercourse. Afterwards, she suggested I take until the next day to decide if it's truly over and assured me she'll do whatever it takes to make amends. I firmly stated that it's over and I can't continue in a relationship where I have to threaten to end it. She says she wants to receive respect, love, and compromise. She starts crying and tells me that I've always been the one for her, the one she'd end up with. She reveals that some of her friends had shown interest in me over the years, but she kept it a secret because she wanted me in the end. Despite her persistent pleas for over an hour, I stand my ground and eventually she accepts the reality and leaves. I receive a screenshot from a friend I saw on Instagram stories she posted for her close friends. I was on that list earlier this week, but I'm not on it anymore. It's a special list in green where you only share content with a select group of followers. The story basically criticizes me for wasting her time, among other things. I decided to send her a final message before blocking her. I told her I hope everything goes well for her and that we can go our separate ways. I feel liberated and look forward to finding a woman who treats me with kindness and loves me for who I am. Here's a fourth story. It all began as a typical Wednesday. I wrapped up my work and headed over to my girlfriend's place to hang out. After dinner, we've been in a relationship for about a year and a half. When I arrived at her house, she explained that she had plans to meet up with her best friend and that they wanted to go to another girl's house, someone they've only met a few times, to have some drinks. I wasn't keen on going to this other girl's house, so I suggested we just spend some time at our best friend's place and then head back home since I had work in the morning. Besides, I find it more enjoyable to hang out with her best friend's boyfriend while they do their thing, so we went to her best friend's place, where I was meant to pick her up and take her to the other girl's house. But when we got there, she suggested we stay at her best friend's place instead. I thought that was a great idea, so we hung out there for about an hour. I had a beer with her boyfriend because he offered it to me, and I accepted to be polite. In general, I try not to drink or do anything during the week. If it were up to me, I'd be in bed by 10 to Monday. On weekends, things are different. When I'm not working, the girls start taking vodka shots and getting quite drunk. Her friend mentioned wanting to leave and go somewhere else. I suggested that it was getting late and I wanted to head home soon, so we should stay put. I didn't argue, but my girlfriend was determined to go somewhere else. She called the girl whose house we were supposed to visit and told her we'd be coming over for a while. I said no, we shouldn't go there, and I needed to get to bed. It was nearly 11 p.m. It was 11. By that point, though, my girlfriend was set on going, so I decided to make a deal. I said, fine, we'll go for an hour and then we're leaving. So we went to this place, and it was just as I expected. A run-down, messy apartment with nowhere to sit and a bunch of people I'd rather not be associated with. It was almost 11. It was 10:30 by this point, and I thought, okay, it's not too long, I'll tough it out. The girls were doing their own thing, socializing with these other girls and continuing to drink. They ended up finishing a bottle of vodka, and all these girls were getting very drunk. When 12 rolled around, I went to get my girlfriend and told her it was time to go. However, she pretty much ignored me and continued what she was doing, almost like a child who doesn't want to leave the playground. I kept reminding her every few minutes, saying it's time to go, let's go, but with no luck. I was trying to get these two drunk girls to leave so I could head home. That's when things took a strange turn. I'm not exactly sure how it began, but suddenly my girlfriend, her friend, and these two other girls went into the bedroom and closed the door. I overheard them mentioning something about a foursome. I was standing outside the room in the living room with some other guys, and we were all thinking, what on earth is happening in there? I didn't want to just barge into the room to get my girlfriend because this is in my house. I have no idea what these girls might be up to in there. I texted my girlfriend, but she didn't reply. A few minutes passed and I could hear them talking to each other inside, so I wasn't too concerned at that point. At some point, one of the girls came out of the room and I approached the door. I went in and told my girlfriend how uncomfortable I was about what was happening. This startled the other two girls and put an end to this supposed conversation. I told my girlfriend again to let her go, and she agreed, asking me to leave the room so she and her friend could get dressed. I wait for a few minutes, but they're still not out. I walk to the door, open it, and there she is, under the blankets on this dirty bed, receiving oral sex from her best friend. I walk in saying something like, "That's gross. What are you doing?" Of course, I stop immediately, and at this point I'm trembling with shock. I tell her I'm leaving, put on my shoes, and I'm just unsure about what to do. Eventually I decide that I'll bring these drunk idiots home. So I return and tell them to gather their stuff so we can leave this bizarre place. Her friend apologizes to me, and I'm at a loss for words. I basically remain silent and drop her friend off before taking my girlfriend home. When we get home, I try to talk with my girlfriend. We talked for a bit, but it was pretty pointless since she was pretty drunk by then. She realized she'd done something wrong and tried to make excuses, saying that I don't give her enough attention and don't do the things she enjoys. We argued for a bit, and I think I managed to get my point across, and then we went to bed the next day. I explained everything to her, and she and her friend thought I'd be okay with it because they are both girls. She also said it was her friend who suggested it, and she went along with it, even though she found it very strange. I told her I was upset, and that it felt like she'd cheated on me, which I'd probably feel even more upset about if it were another guy. It still doesn't sit well with me. Now she's feeling very guilty about it. After work, things are a bit awkward between us, and she's acting quite differently from her usual self. I'm quite uncertain about how to handle this situation. I get that it's seen as cheating, regardless of whether it's with a guy or a girl. I also realize that if I hadn't walked into that room, I might never have found out about this. I told my girlfriend that I understand she might have thought it was okay because it was another girl, but I'm very uncomfortable with it. I made it clear that if something like this happened again, I would end the relationship. Do you think I'm being too forgiving in this situation?